evening, and welcome to Planet Waves FM. Tonight's edition is for the September 17th full moon in the sign Pisces. That is also a partial lunar eclipse conjunct Neptune. It is lovely to be with you here in this slowed down pace of both my life and of this program. Thanks for joining me. I have a few things to talk about here beside the rising tide, notably of the Pisces, very, very Pisces full moon. Just as an indicator of how Neptune works, this is a strange planet. It has a way of disappearing, and things around it can seem to disappear as well. And one of the things that disappeared is the fact that this full moon is a partial lunar eclipse. I completely missed this fact. I actually read about it in a Substack post. I forget who sent it. I think it was Emily Trinkus, one of those astrologers who does have something to say. And I have noticed with Neptune that it can have the effect of making things vanish into the void. It is rather unusual that I would miss something like an eclipse. Now, I will say that as my astrology career has gone on, there are certain things that I have, let's say, reduced the emphasis on. And reduce the emphasis on the significance and the importance of, and one of them is Mercury retrograde, and another is eclipses. Now, these things are all meaningful, but in my life and in my practice, they have now more become part of the background. I didn't miss that the next new moon is an eclipse in Libra, however, and I have included that in various different things that will be coming out. So anyway, not only is this forthcoming eclipse conjunct Neptune, but interestingly, and I think significantly as well, the moon makes a total eclipse to Saturn on September 17th, and then a total eclipse to Neptune. Planets can get eclipsed when they go by the sun. When planets like Venus or Mercury go by the sun, that's called a transit. But when the moon conceals a planet, that is actually called an occultation, but you could also call it an eclipse. And there are two that lead in to the lunar eclipse. Now, this is to say that there's a declination alignment going on between them. Since the moon's declination does not change that fast, this is all going on in one sign, all within maybe approximately 15 degrees of the zodiac. So there is actually quite a bit of activity around this. What does this mean? I'm not sure, but I'm here with you tonight to embark on a journey of ideas, and I have appreciated the fact that I have had more time to contemplate those ideas, and also to open up the microphone when I am ready to do so. That alone is a very helpful thing to have available. As I've mentioned a couple of times, I have been doing quite a bit of slowing down and simplifying, and it's been a bit of a cleanup time for me. I have completed my 60th year of life back in March, and I've never actually felt a birthday be so meaningful, as if I was turning a corner and as if I had actually accomplished something. And I had wondered what this would feel like, particularly given the Chinese New Year, the Chinese cycle, this being the year of the dragon. and I'm born in the year of the dragon, and it is also a year of the green dragon, and we get one of those every 60 years. Green dragon is the mellow version of the dragon. There's a lot of versions. There's the metal dragon. There's the fire dragon. I'm the wood dragon, and the wood dragon is more chill. It does not have that competitive streak, or not always. It's a little bit tamped down from, for example, the red dragon or the metal dragon, and everything, like my cells and my bones and my blood were all saying, "It's time to slow down this movie a little bit." Between all the different things I do, first of all, because I try to do them well, that takes time, thought, and energy, and I have to have the resources to do that. So there's extra energy involved in, creating the financial resources to do things well, and being personally available and all that. So it has created a very intense ecosystem that I have lived within. And like a lot of people, I have felt like there was no easy way to slow down the process of my life. And it occurred to me that I just have to do things. But that only really happened after getting swept into a couple of major news developments. And one of them was in May, and that was the sort of semi-student uprising around Gaza. And then I had a rest from that. Usually I just go right into the next thing. And then there was the whole episode with Trump getting hit by a dart and having his body exposed by the Secret Service, and that what I've characterized as a military coup. And I really had a chill from that. That went on during Mercury retrograde. So I spent Mercury retrograde doing a lot of scraping and patching the hull, and also writing horoscopes. I'm almost out to the end of the year. I am out to the end of the year for half the signs, and I've just got a couple of weeks left for 6 of the signs. So this is it has been wonderful to have any ability at all to be more reflective and contemplative. And I think that one of the problems of our time right now, one of the problems of our society right now, is the combination of how fast everything is going, and something maybe that has occurred to you, it certainly has occurred to me, which is that not only do we not have time to think about what is happening, but we really need it. And the habitual nature of electrical consciousness and digital consciousness can make it very difficult to stop and think, to pause at all, because there's always something immediately, or seems to be, demanding action, demanding a decision of some kind, or demanding that we be in another place. And remember, I'm a someone who does not keep a date calendar. I've always bought those little books. Well, they're not little. They're like $35 now. And then I basically never get past late December, and then I don't use the thing. So I'll lately jot something into my iCal calendar, but I'm amazed how far in advance people plan, how they know what they're doing, on like February 3rd at 10 o'clock in the morning, and lo and behold, they are actually doing it. I find that really stressful. I had concert tickets a week ago, and not only was the concert local, it was really, I knew, going to be a good show. It was Cat Power doing Bob Dylan. I'm utterly in love with Cat Power. And Bob, of course, I think is one of the great writers of our lifetimes, perhaps in English, of all times, right up there with Shakespeare. And my body was not getting up to go. I'm like, that's it. I'm not going. It would have been lovely to go. I didn't have a commitment to go with anyone. I just had one ticket, and I stayed home. One of the things that we get with all of this digital consciousness is being thrust onto the astral plane. I often use the word disembodied to describe this. And that is the essence of the astral plane. It is disembodied. Common astral plane experiences are acid trips and dreams. And those are both things that kind of either take you out of your body completely or loosen up the relationship between your mind and your body. You can be experiencing things in your mind that you're not experiencing in physical reality. You can travel places that your mind is going, but your physical body is not going. But the astral plane, which is pretty much the very next dimension to ours, it's the closest dimension to this framework of conventional space and time. I don't think the numbers work to say that it's 4D or 5D, because you say 5D and you're invoking all these new age concepts. But it is very close to physical space and time, but it is distinguished by the slight removal from physical space and time. The astral does not follow the laws of physical space and time. And one of the things about the astral is that it is difficult to find your way back to someplace that you were. Recurring dreams are one way that happens, but I have never been able to make a recurring dream happen. I have several that have followed me throughout long parts of my life, some since childhood, but it's never a voluntary act. There's no, for me anyway, I've not noticed that there's a map to getting to some of these places that I find, and they're a little bit strange to think about. When I think about one of them is this place that's accessed through a locker room. Now, I didn't have sports in high school and only minimal sports in junior high school. There's absolutely no sports in my high school. So I, unlike a lot of high school students, did not spend a lot of time in locker rooms. But there's this one space that's accessible through a locker room. And it's there's a portal back there. It's to the left side and the back of the locker room that leads to this whole other dimension. And the dimension includes a very large residential space with many different rooms, and it includes all of these service corridors, and there are these scenarios that are there associated with the physical spaces or the astral spaces, but I can't find it voluntarily. One of the unusual things about the astral plane, known as digital, is that it kind of self-documents. You can leave a trail to be able to get back to a dream you had. And the dream you had might be in the form of a website that you saw, or a podcast that you heard, a video that you heard. And sometimes these things have a way of disappearing back into the Rita, and you cannot get there. But often, you can trace your way back. And this is a strange property of what I believe is an astral plane, the digital plane, because it has many of the properties of the astral plane, but it documents its locations in space and time. You can tell when you were there. You know when you sent an email. A lot of times I try to figure out what I was doing at a certain time by when I sent the email, or I get up. When did I go to bed? Okay, I sent my last email at that hour. So this is a strange property of what I think of as a synthetic astral plane. And the thing about this, one of the things about the synthetic astral plane is that, like the awareness of a dream can follow you throughout the day and affect your state of mind, even if you don't consciously think of the dream, you're still kind of lurking around with that awareness and, bubbling up out of the not fully conscious part of consciousness, is that there is a polarized quality to anything on the astral plane. That is one of the ways that you know that you're there, is that there is intense polarization. So if you're wondering why things get so intensely polarized on the internet, why things seem to be, in fact, ridiculously polarized, that is a clue that you are on the astral plane. And as part of that polarization, there is quite a bit of fear involved. Now, one of the things about the synthetic astral plane of digital is that it seems to conduct fear much more readily than it conducts anything pleasurable. It seems to eat soft emotions. It seems to have a hardening effect on those who are in it, and then that hardening effect can spill back over into physical life as a kind of lack of empathy. And there has never been a media environment as all pervasive as the digital plane. The digital plane is a subset of the electrical kind of environment that began to envelop the planet sometime around the 1840s when telegraph starts happening. I don't have a chart for the first telegraph transmission, like the first back and forth actual telegraph transmission. I believe that was between New York and Baltimore, and it was a chess game. So it doesn't matter what's conducted. And this began the gradual encircling of the globe with electrical communication wires and eventually electric light. Communication came first, then came light. And then we were in this world where night was turned to day. And even the all-pervasiveness of the light bulb, of artificial light, I perhaps could stand to think this through 5 or 10 more times, but my sense from looking at these things is that digital really is the most completely absorbing and subsuming and transformative of all. And it is the very height of the electrical environment. And it is the height of the electrical environment converted into highly polarized zeros and ones. And so the invisible quality of the environment is the thing that we experience the most directly, but are the least likely to notice. So it is creating the most powerful effect that permeates and soaks through everything, but it is the least likely thing to notice because it is a factor lurking in the ubiquitous, invisible environment. And we could look at this through the lens of a number of different planets. But while we've got the moon making an eclipse of this, first of all, it is eclipsed, and then it is eclipsing Neptune, and it will also eclipse Saturn. All of this going on in Pisces. So there's a lot of Pisces activity being stirred up. Let's consider, we are considering digital as a Neptunian astral kind of thing. And one of the things about Neptune is that you it can disappear. You do not necessarily notice when Neptune is happening until you have no longer any ability to do anything about it except deal with the fact that you're there because Neptune creeps up. It's like by the time you realize there's a flood, you're up to your hips. And this is what happened with both electrical environmental factors and digital environmental factors. And so as this full moon happens, I would propose paying attention to these things about digital that we know are astral in nature, and particularly the kind of floaty, disembodied feeling and the polarized experience of digital, which is used to stoke polarization. Notice how little is done to instill peace and love on the internet. The internet is always a crisis every minute and then a controversy every other minute. There's not how many worldwide meditations for peace have there been on the internet? In actual fact, there was a worldwide meditation for peace, which took place in August of 1987, and this was organized by mail and telephone, and there were thousands of celebrations all over the world. I was at one of them. And so not only was the internet lacking for that discussion, I mean, it was in the 1980s. There was absolutely nothing. The first time I ever heard of email was 1994. I heard of chat like maybe 2 years before that when my friend Sean Springer was chatting with, I think, Jay Heitzman, an old girlfriend of mine who was away at school, or maybe he graduated and they were chatting. But email, 1994. So in the 1980s, there was no meek concept of a civilian internet. And most civilians had no concept that there was an international military first and then academic network that could be used for things like electronic mail and chatting. We organized the harmonic convergence of August 1987 with things like postcards. And the place where I was, Miracle Manor in Piscataway, New Jersey, a 16-acre facility, a convent along the Raritan River, was packed with 200 people showed up. And there was no public announcement. And it was very, very special. And now we have this ability to be in communication around the clock, and these things do not happen. I don't know of one actual global meditation for peace. Maybe I knew of one and it's been swallowed. If you know of one, tell me. But certainly nothing on the scale of the harmonic convergence, which began what was thought of as a 25-year span between that moment and 12/21/12. And I think that that's because the digital realm is not conducive to this kind of thought form, to this kind of idea. And it is conducive to all kinds of paranoid imaginings and hyperbolic claims, and more than anything, of faking things, of spoofing. That was the first kind of deep fake that happened on the internet, where you could use PHP and you could create the appearance of an email coming from anyone, anywhere, including the return address being completely convincing. Hijacking domains this way, and it would be possible, for example, to send a bulk mailing from something that seemed like the Planet Wave server, et cetera, et cetera. That never happened to us, but it could be done. It happened to other people. And so one of the qualities of the internet, of digital consciousness, right, the consciousness induced by exposure to the technology is the feeling that this is all fake. Now, before digital, most people's experience of astral consciousness was through things like meditation, was through drug experiences, mushroom acid experiences. Ayahuasca comes along much later, and I'm still waiting for to learn something interesting about ayahuasca. My challenge to anyone who's ever taken ayahuasca is, tell me something I don't know. It's supposed to be a big deal. I'm glad the trend has settled down a little bit, but I had all these people in my life, some of whom really thought they had become enlightened because they had tripped on ayahuasca so many times, and some of them were extremely mean. And this is an effect of exposure or overexposure to the astral plane. It is polarized in one direction. But prior to the internet, it seemed to be more balanced. There were pleasant experiences. There were more loving experiences. I have made some good friends on the internet. However, and I mean, they really are among my closest friends at this time. People I only, maybe I've spoken to them or Zoomed, but for the most part, I know them through email. I was going somewhere with that. But for the most part, there's a lot of consternation, fear, intentional polarization. I've been on Substack now. I think my first thing I ever did on Substack was April Fool's Day 2022. 2022? It was before 2023. Way before. It was 2022. And I didn't think I'd be doing much on Substack platform. And I wrote a April Fool's Day satire, which was an apology to Tony Fauci for being such a pain in the ass. And over that 2.5-ish years, my involvement in Substack has increased. And with that, more and more and more, I was on more and more lists. And one of the things I did, for those of you who haven't heard of Substack, it's integrated. It's kind of like what Planet Waves was and still is, which is an integrated email, web, audio content system that's monetized. But before Substack, we've easily spent $100,000 creating the various systems that we have, which because it's the internet, they have to keep getting scrapped. So I would estimate that Planet Waves has spent $100,000 building a Substack-like system for itself, going back to around 2000 and maybe 2008. We launched our first integrated system with a sales system and product codes and automatic assignment to lists and things like that. Anyway, Substack comes along, which makes this available to anyone, and quite literally, anyone does get involved. And one of the things I did during the Mercury retrograde, and I do miss that time, it was kind of a special, quiet moment in my life because I stopped as many things as I could, and I went on my own schedule, which facilitated writing horoscopes out to the end of the year with no sweat. I got on more and more lists, and during the Mercury retrograde, I started deleting, unsubscribing from them. And I will tell you that I have not unsubscribed from one of the lists that I pay for. I subscribe to maybe 10 people's lists. Most of them my friends or those who I think are really doing something admirable. And then I was on about 50 others. And all day long, I was getting these deeply disturbing emails, which reaffirmed my idea that one of the things that people are doing on the internet is sitting around passively waiting to be triggered. I don't know how much of a quote-unquote content creator you are, but the more you trigger people, the more engagement that you get. The more calm your pieces are, the more calm your broadcasts or essays, the less engagement you get because you're not triggering people. And it occurred to me that not only are people waiting around to be triggered, but many of the presenters have figured out that people are waiting around to be triggered and therefore devise their content stream in such a way that pushes people's buttons in ways that they want to be pushed. That is not about tuning in and responding voluntarily to your situation or to the world situation or to whatever it may be, to art or to an idea. What occurred to me after much contemplation is that this is a kind of a game. And as part of the game, the typical, by the numbers, the vast majority of people who experience the internet want to do so in a way that is uncreative and passive, where they're waiting for something to happen. So you have a lot of people waiting for something to happen. And then what happens is the presenters realize there's people waiting to be triggered, and engagement equals attention, equals shares and forwards and increasing subscriptions. And then the posts and podcasts are, for the most part, almost all of them, designed to provoke and trigger people. And I sat here, I have to sit at this desk quite a bit of the time. I sit here too much when I don't have to. That the posts were more and more becoming designed to inflame my response rather than tell me anything, teach me anything, present anything in any kind of a reasoned way. And that a great many of these presenters basically just learn how to transact a kind of an ongoing state of trauma. There's a good few that are talking about the devil all day long, like Satan is taking over, and they can't stop talking about child trafficking, which is terrible, but talking about it on the internet all day long is not going to do much. And I got fed up with this. I realized the game was being played. It is not any kind of a game that I'm playing, and that is one of the reasons why my life is much calmer. And speaking of calmer, this is Vision Quest, and this piece is called Xanax. Here you go. Vision Quest. Xanax. That's a joke. We have some friends who had a band that was an offshoot of another project called Mercury Rev, and I forget the name of the prescription medication that they named themselves after. And just as a kind of a tossing the ball back in their direction, we named a couple of our pieces after various different prescription medications, not an endorsement or an affirmation in any way. That was Vision Quest with me and Daniel Sternstein. You can hear there are several different guitar styles. The opening piece was just me, so that's a little bit more of my style. Sometimes finger picking and looking around for its destination. And that opening, way back 40 minutes and 30 seconds ago, was called 48 Seconds of Love. You're listening to Planet Waves FM. We are part of the Pacifica Radio Network. The Planet Waves FM radio project has its roots in Radio Woodstock in 1996. I first did my own live radio program in a format somewhat similar to this, always reaching for the vibe that I have wanted, and I now feel like I'm as close to it as I've ever been. And that began on September 22nd on the autumn equinox of 1996. And Woodstock went on the air at 11 o'clock. That is chartable. Gerald Montano and Bernie Fickett made that possible. Radio Woodstock made us pay them a lot of money to have me on the air. You think, community radio station, they'll just give you a slot middle of the night. No, they made us pay for all the advertising. that would have been sold, but of course wouldn't be sold. Nobody's buying advertising at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday in the Hudson Valley of New York. And finally, I convinced Gary Chetkov, the owner of WDST, a Pisces, to let us do the program for free. So we did about the last 40 of the 75 shows for free, maybe more. So where I was going with my whole last discussion is I am concerned that people are becoming a bunch of paranoia junkies, that we have become, we as a culture, we as an internet culture, we as a culture influenced by everything that happens in the digital environment. We who are becoming like our tools. That's what happens. We create our tools and our tools create us. And so we've created this digital environment and an electrical environment. And we collectively have made it. And I only give Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and various other internet executives, designers of financiers of the internet, DARPANet and BitNet and all these academic and military programs, so much credit. Because in many ways, especially at first in the 1990s and the early 2000s, it was we the people who were creating the internet. Some of you remember back to that original Planet Waves website with the kind of supernova, the red, yellow, and white supernova that was on the cover, that was a sort of standing cover of Planet Waves for some years at the beginning. And since that time, we have become like this tool we have created. And what none of us knew at the time, or maybe Larry Page and Sergey, what's his name, knew, and maybe somebody like Jobs, who was extremely perceptive, knew that they were creating a robot. But in one of my first discussions with a serious McLuhan scholar, not in the family, Mark Stallman, when I was first introduced to the McLuhans, and I think Andrew or Eric, Marshall's son, introduced me to Mark Stallman. He said, the people on that level, this is back to, maybe this is in 2016, 2015, when I started my serious study of the internet with the McLuhans. He said, guys like the Google guys, they know that they've created the robot. That's what he called it, the robot, meaning this all-pervasive robot. And they know that now they work for it. And we have crossed a series of thresholds on the way to, by we, I mean the human family, becoming the property of the robot. One of them was on 9/11. And one of them was COVID. And if you study both of these, you can get a sense of the story arc of digital consciousness. TV was still pretty powerful in the days of 2001, 9/11. And in a way, all TV was swallowed by digital. That's what always happens. The old medium becomes the content of the new medium. As books became radio shows, and radio shows became TV shows. When the book was made, when the book was invented. This is I read this in a book called The Gutenberg Galaxy by Marshall McLuhan, one of his first books, maybe the first book he wrote. The idea of new books was not a consideration. The thought of books was, oh, look at all these old books. Now we can have them in print. We can make a library of all the old books. We can typeset things off of scrolls and manuscripts. And then it occurred to them they could make new books. Now this is hard to believe, that the consideration was not new books. In fact, that was not a consideration at all, and then it became one. In the days of the early radio, they thought the money was going to be in selling radio sets. It hadn't occurred to anyone that advertising was going to be the big boon for those in radio. And this keeps happening over and over again, and digital swallowed television, and yet there was something of 9/11 is one of the charts that is on the tipping point thresholds for the digital age, when that was absolutely no turning back on the digital age. And the whole 9/11 truth movement grows up on the internet. That's one of the first major products of digital only. It's kind of the last remaining remnant of Internet 1.0 was the 9/11 truth movement in the early days, all the various different boards and discussion groups going on, and endless reams and reams of these kind of like bulletin boards, basically. And the second major turning point, as far as I'm concerned, was COVID. And when you look at COVID and you set aside the idea that there was a pandemic and that there was a virus and that people got sick from the virus, none of which checks out by the numbers. It doesn't check out by the analysis of the scientific papers. None of that checks out. But let's just pretend for a second that none of that exists. What you see actually happening, if you were to look at society not understanding why it was said to be happening, everything rushed toward the internet. It was a takeover by big tech of society. And suddenly one day everyone's going to school, going to work, and then the next day everyone is going to school and going to work on the internet. That could have happened by natural mutation, but it wouldn't have happened very fast, and it might not have happened nearly as thoroughly. It might not have happened at all in the same way. Obviously, it would be different because had that coup d'etat not been pulled over on us, nobody really wants to sit around the house and be on their computer all day unless you're somehow already self-employed. Certainly nobody wants to go to school. I mean, maybe somebody does. I would have quit. I would have just, I would not have, I would have become a musician or a photographer as my primary things. Had university been on the internet, how boring. All the fun of university was going to classes and then wherever you found me, high school, college, whatever, you would have found me editor-in-chief of something, with a cool staff around me, doing something interesting on Saturday night, coming out early in the week, the next week. And in this case, we come out on Thursdays. And case of university, we published on Tuesdays. Kind of do the thing that I do, is edit what in one dream I dreamed was the coolest prison newspaper ever. That's what Planet Waves was. This was about 15 years ago. One of two dreams I had explaining to me what Planet Waves is. And I thought, oh, that's kind of creepy. Now that we've gone through COVID, I understand what that dream was about, that we'd be the coolest prison newsletter ever. Jesus Christ. So COVID does all the digital things. It polarizes everyone. It uses not only digital technology, but digital consciousness to terrorize and terrify everyone. And utilizes digital technology for the illusion of everyone testing positive. And if I'm an expert on one thing in this life, it is this. The way the claimed virus was invented using metatranscriptomics or metagenomic transcription, as I prefer to say it. Either one works. And the instructions for the test were sent out around the world at the speed of light on the internet, and then boom, suddenly there were claims of positive test results in every country without people realizing that there was no virus spreading. There was a phony test for a virus spreading, and this was digital taking over. And what we had was a lot of people who were disembodied by overexposure to digital technology. By 2020, everybody was pretty much fried, therefore disembodied, therefore the only thing that would remind people that they are in a body is threatening to kill it. That's very matrixy, isn't it? That you get the plug pulled and then suddenly your soul dies out there on the astral plane. That was the threat. That was the frightening thing. And it worked. And then suddenly, this was true even before COVID, Zoom, worth more whatever worth it means, worth more than all the American airlines combined, Delta, United, and all those. That's Boeing 777s are expensive. And these airlines have fleets of these very nice aircraft. Hopefully they stay in the air. And this telecom thing that you just have video conferencing was worth far more, like multiple times more than all the airlines combined. That just shocked me. I never even used Zoom when I heard this. So I was like late to the party. And that meant radical overexposure. That meant that the death threat got traction with people. And so they're using the consciousness changed, mutated, irreversibly mutated by overexposure to digital consciousness, plus the phony tests going around the world at the speed of light being plugged into computers, and that's it. Boom, wherever the test goes, there's a virus because the test is the virus, not the other way around. And combine that with the fear level, and what you really get is a takeover by big tech. And then they come along with a so-called vaccine that's supposed to reprogram our bodies. And what does it reprogram them to do, according to the mythology of the vaccine, if you believe any of this? We are told that it induces the creation of spike protein, the thing that creates the inflammation response that kills you, and then the body is supposed to make a antigen response to the spike protein, and it sets off a war within the physical body. That's very astral. And my concern amid all of this is that the world will continue to get more hostile. Now, I mean, in my neighborhood, which I use as kind of a canary in the coal mine, it's a mixed bag. There are people who are polite. There are people who are kind of jerks. There are people who are out of it. There are people who are paying attention. There's a couple of people who are actively involved. There's a whole lot of people who are apathetic. But there's not really that much actual connection going on between people. And I notice the overwhelming number of human contacts that I have, money changes hands. It is in the context of a commercial transaction. Now, I utilize all of my commercial transactions to create some kind of friendly transaction. So I try to be besties with all the ladies who work in the Broadway Lights Diner, a few blocks from my house, where you'll often find me having breakfast. I know many of the farmers market vendors, and I'm loyal to them. I know almost all of the businesses up and down my street, since I live in one of the only actual concentrated business districts in Kingston. Almost all of my transactions with people involved a financial transaction. I think that's a very sad reflection of the state of the world. The other thing I do is I meet every dog. Now, that is not a commercial transaction. That is a completely spiritual and loving transaction. In fact, it's not really a transaction at all. I just have a real understanding for canine beings, and they generally like me, and I like them, and so I meet a lot of dogs, and then I meet the people connected to the dog. This goes on any given day from like 1 to 10 times. Well, that's good, because nobody's paying anybody to do this, and the dog's not interested in money. They just want love, and they like when you respect them and don't pat them on the head. And the people like when you know how to meet their dog. And so that's the other way that I meet people, is by meeting their dogs. But I am weird. I am the only person who does this around here, where if a dog crosses my path, I meet the dog and the people. because there's got to be something. And I do not detect there's many places anywhere where there is an open social conversation going on. If there are, I don't know about them. And this is a sign of our times. Now, the commercial level is very important. I think maybe one of the things that's always held society together. It's certainly been responsible for all kinds of exploration and, the building of nations and communities and tribes and cultures is largely commercial. And maybe I'm dreaming when I think that I think there should be a world where that's not the thing that's driving everything, but it seems to be the thing that's driving everything, and it seems like hardly anybody is even noticing that that's the thing that's driving everything. Isn't it strange? But when you think of how the environment is usually invisible, meaning the prevailing conditions of the ground field are usually not described for what they are. They're not seen for what they are. They're not observed. Well, then maybe it's not that strange. But I notice, and at least I try to take advantage of it. Work with what I've got. So anyway, I was intending to talk a little bit about the astrology of our moment of this full moon chart. I think I did it on the Starcast podcast. If you want to hear a more concentrated astrological analysis, check starcast.fm. That should take you right to the free version of the Starcast page. Sometimes it's usually posted on the front at planetwaves.net. That's a non-Substack page, planetwaves.net. Anyway, there's this series of eclipses through Pisces, which would seem to me like the kind of series of transformations in the dream that we are dreaming, and maybe we will wake up and know that we are dreaming. While this is going on, and this has been more of a topic I've talked about on the Starcast podcast. That's the podcast associated with my horoscope column and weekly article series that goes back about 25 years. We are experiencing, for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to describe two main things in the charts. One of the things I've been talking about, and I know some of you are listeners and subscribers over at Starcast, is what I'm calling the family Hunger Games aspect. And this is a cluster of planets in early Capricorn. It includes Quatwar, a planet associated with the creation of humanity itself. It includes a point called Pholus, which is about the most recent 3 or 4 generations. It includes Ixion, this quality of consciousness that seems to have traveled down thousands of generations, that is the evil in the form of having no meek concept of right and wrong. Amorality. And then there's this lovely kind of loving, artsy, let's get together, peace and love kind of point called Cupido. That's one of the make-believe planets from the Uranian system of astrology. And then there's something very tangible, which is Ceres, which is about the cultivation of grain and mass production in general. And when I kind of take the average of these points, I'm looking at the influence of consciousness-altering substances in our moment. And when you consider that one of the things McLuhan pointed out, by the way, he is my favorite philosopher because he's so meaningful, basically. I'm not into ideas for their own sake. McLuhan does not give us that. McLuhan gives us ideas that will help us get through the woods, like, if you're stranded and you have a Swiss Army knife and matches, you're going to do a lot better than somebody who's stranded in the woods without a Swiss Army knife and matches. McLuhan is the Swiss Army knife and matches of philosophy. The computer environment he described in the 1970s as the equivalent of an acid trip. So that would qualify as a consciousness-altering substance. What I've been going on about for months on StarCast is the grape and the grain quality of the grape being folus. That's about wine. Ceres, that's about grain. That's about liquor. And encouraging people to contemplate their relationship to alcohol. Taken very casually, available anywhere. I could probably walk from where I'm sitting right now to 10 places that sell alcohol within a 5-minute walk. And I'm in a little teeny town. So now imagine that someone had laced the drinking water with LSD. And things got really weird. And yet no one said, hey, are we tripping? Is something like happening here? Did someone spike my water with something? Things are not normal. Well, so our society right now is going through an acid trip, a mass, collective, deep acid trip, and no one's saying anything about it. I'm saying something now, but if you've heard anyone else bring up this facet of digital transformation, please let me know. And one of the things that I am deeply concerned about, though I have been talking quite a bit about the grape and the grain from this 5-pointed conjunction in Capricorn, is that now suddenly there's cannabis everywhere. Now, there are a couple of states that don't have it. I think Georgia, they're still, searching your car with the police dogs. Pretty much everywhere else, cannabis is ubiquitous. And people are hitting vapes. Not everyone, but a lot of people are hitting vapes all the time. You can't really test for this. There's not really a sobriety test. Most people would pass a sobriety test if they were on a modest amount of weed. It doesn't fuck you up like alcohol does. But weed, as one of my readers pointed out, when I called for discussion of the issue, I'm calling for the discussion over on the Planet Waves Substack. More, but please enter your thoughts here on the Chiron Return Planet Waves FM Substack, is he said that cannabis takes on the properties of whatever it is you're doing. It fuses with whatever it is you're doing. And he said, this is why if you're going to smoke weed, go out in nature, go in a forest, go to the beach. If all you have is a beautiful park, sit in the park, get outside and do something rather than mingling this open, vulnerable state of consciousness with digital. But most people are on digital most of the time. And my concern is, I got to this point when I said, all right, why now? I mean, it seems like way overdue that we legalized weed, and there's no point putting people in jail for 20 years and cops busting people for walking down the street, smoking a joint. It's fucking ridiculous. But then either why now or, this is happening at the same time as this. And we are so thick and deep into the irreversible, irrevocable digital age, meaning digital consciousness, meaning our minds transformed by the digital experience, that there is absolutely no turning back, and it is into this environment that cannabis appears as overnight ubiquitous, everywhere, environmental. And I'm thinking we need to really consider this. Now, who's going to consider it? I did get a letter from one of my more thoughtful, long-term readers, someone who corresponds and shares her ideas. She is a therapist. I'm always interested in hearing from people who work with people. And she said that she's been going through a deep reconsideration of her relationship to alcohol. She's Australian. Alcohol is part of Brit and Australian culture far more deeply than it's part of American culture, and it's pretty well steeped in American culture, but it's even more so in Australia and in England. She was calling it grog, and grog, I had to look it up. It means a number of different things. Really, it's a kind of a rum, it's kind of a 50% diluted with water. That's not very diluted for hard liquor. Mixed with like spices or lemon or something like this. So what she means by grog is liquor, not even beer, liquor. And she's made some interesting points about how she's really had to reconsider the effect that it has both on her consciousness, and I believe she mentioned her brain. It is a brain toxin. I'm one of these people who loves the concept of moderation. I don't drink a lot, but I have a nice collection of agaves and tequilas and things like that. Like, that's where I like to go with the alcohol thing, considering that I don't really like wine. By putting my tomato sauce cooks all the alcohol off, and I can't really drink beer, but I never really liked beer that much. I finally decided after decades of experimentation that, my shelf in the liquor store is the stuff made from cactus plants. But I don't do it very much. And I'm thinking, well, no, there's too much risk. And I've been doing less and less and less and less and less weed. I'm one of these people who smokes so little weed that I almost have never run out. Every time I buy a bag, I've still got some, or a package, whatever it is. I've still got some left 10 years later. The only reason I get more is to have something different, or because my friend opens a weed store or something like this. Well, I have tuned into the extent to which this colors my perception, and after not doing any, I did a little a few weekends ago. It took me a fucking week to get my normal consciousness back, and my sleep cycle has still not returned. So now I'm going way back down on the caffeine, because I think that even if I drink a couple of cups of coffee in the morning, it's affecting me at midnight the next day. And there are those people. And I think we really have to be thinking about how sensitive consciousness is while we're already under the influence of this basically society-wide acid trip. We are already parked on the astral plane. So we get a lot of Pisces activity over the next few days, with the moon making an occultation or eclipse to Saturn, then it's eclipsed, then Neptune. And with the grape and the grain aspect, the grape being Pholus and the grain being Ceres, plus all these other points, not only in a conjunction, but they're in a conjunction concentrated at 90 degrees to this thing called the lunar node, this highly sensitive point that is like the spiritual digestive tract. We've all seen those pictures of an amoeba with, like, stuff goes in one end and comes out the other, kind of like us, but it's simpler. That's the lunar nodes. But when something's at 90 degrees to the lunar nodes, that's the thing that everything hinges upon. And at the time of the full moon eclipse, conjunct Neptune, and et cetera, in Pisces, oops, the music started a little bit soon, Mars is right there opposite Pholus, which could just kind of go and set things off, the small cause and the big effect. So I will conclude my reading of the astrology, my somewhat circuitous reading of the astrology, with the reminder that we are very much in the small cause and the big effect territory. And this is happening with massive activity in Pisces, which tends to disappear. I mean, just think of how funny it is that I didn't notice that this was an eclipse. I mean, I did not miss much astrologically, but I did not notice this was an eclipse. That's the nature of Neptune. The most obvious thing can just vanish into the haze with Mars opposite Pholus. Square the nodes. Big impact, big influence. So we have to take it easy. And I am all but pleading with people to let's get this discussion going about the nature of these consciousness transforming substances in the midst of the digital astral plane, in the midst of the robot, in the midst of the electrical LSD trip called the internet. This next piece by Vision Quest is called Ultra Bell. Ultra Bell from Vision Quest on Planet Waves FM Pacifica Radio Network. You are listening to Planet Waves FM in its new incarnation with mostly, so far, this is the second program of the new era, no musical pieces by anyone other than Vision Quest. So I will be curious who gets the first exception. And I have musical tributes planned to various people that I have not done. Paul Simon is one of them, and at some point those will happen. Might not be part of this exact program, but maybe some other. Anyway, as always, good to be with you. I'm recording on a warm Saturday night. There was a muscle car show outside my door. There's only two places where anything actually happens in Kingston, and one of them is my block, basically. It's the block where if you're riding a Harley, you rev your engine coming down my street because there's nowhere else to rev your engine where anybody's going to hear it. And then the other is all the big festivals are held in what's called downtown by the waterfront, but all the little festivals like the Muscle Car Show are held here in what's called uptown Kingston. So that was going on, and they were much quieter about getting the cars out than they were about getting them in. I thought I was going to have to wait for hours to do the program, and there was a stage set up, and I thought, am I going to be blasting music? How am I going to do the show? There's nowhere to hide. But no, things are quiet, and there's no Antifa Black Lives Matter protests going on outside my door, but who knows, maybe there will be in 5 minutes. Here in the new age of Planet Waves FM, the discussion of sexual and erotic reality is now not renamed, but reconceived as Shri Yantra Studio. And this is a more direct reference to a tantric concept, and that is Paravritti, which means to turn back up. I think of it also as the turning toward. It's the same concept, basically, to turn back up, to be descending and to turn around and to go back up, or to be projected forward in time, or as Laurie Anderson said, backward into the future. But that implies that the turning toward has happened. I think we're kind of flying forward into the future, looking into the rearview mirror. And what is turned back up or turned toward is the yoni in Tantra, and not merely anything. As I talked about last week, worth going back to that program, maybe also worth separating it out. Let's see if I feel like that, to have its own player so that you can have that introduction handy without listening through the whole program. The yoni in Tantra is held to be the gateway into time. We are born, with the exception of those who have been born by C-section, and that's becoming a fair number of people. I wish it didn't happen, but it does. But we're supposed to be born through the yoni, and that, therefore, is the gateway of time. And we experience time as facing away from the gateway into time and being somehow propelled into this weird thing, which is the future, which sort of leaves the past behind. And what Philip Rawson, a historian of tantric imagery, is saying in this book, Tantra, the Indian Cult of Ecstasy, that was given to me by my teacher, Joseph Trousseau, is that the essential maneuver of the tantric path is to turn around and face the gateway into time. as I put it somewhat less eloquently, to turn around and face the cosmic cunt from which we all emerge one way or the other from this. And this requires so many things, so much complete, total reassessment that it is akin to being a whole new person when you're done. It is a complete dismantling of the personality, of the psyche, and a complete reorientation. This necessarily involves the contemplation of, the discussion of, and the practice of sexual experiences, but conceived of in an entirely different way than you have ever thought of them or experienced them. Maybe by accident you've slipped into this. Maybe you know a little bit something about tantric practice and you've had a glimpse at it. I think this happens more commonly by accident, and people don't know what the heck was that. Wow, that was different. What was that? Well, that was kind of like stumbling into one of the rooms. And what must be remembered is that the entire conversation around all facets of sex, sexuality, and eroticism is verboten. It is basically forbidden. Forbidden by cultural discussion, forbidden by all the things that blot it out, all of the advertising culture, all of the religious culture, and nearly all of feminism. Feminism has a very strained relationship with the sexuality of women. And in the next segment, this is a little bit of a warm-up for that, I'm going to address that issue. And this will take a long time, which is not going to happen tonight, but I'm going to begin to broach the topic tonight. And one of the people I'm guided by, or at least who is kind of running in a parallel path, but not a sexual path, she is deconstructing the sociology and the politics of feminism, is Janice Fiamengo. And she is, in my view, and I've known her now since 2018 to 19, 21, 22, 24, 6 years, an honest commentator, critic, and theorist, and historian. If you hear me critique feminism or criticize feminism, I would like you to know, though I cannot control this fact, but I would like you to know that I am not talking about men and women respecting one another, treating one another with dignity, and respecting the potential of every human being. That is not what I'm talking about. When I talk about feminism, I'm talking about a set of philosophies, of which there are thousands, that have co-opted a problem that was not properly defined at the time of the birth of this movement in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York, at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I don't have the date, but I've got the chart downstairs. The date's not in mind, but I got this down to a chart when the discussion began, when the first presenter went on at a conference that was alleged to be a suffrage conference. And that's the only proposal that did not pass unanimously. There were opponents at this in Seneca Falls. What it was, as was much of what was called feminism in the 19th century, an attack on male sexuality, which was held to be the most disgusting, repugnant, criminal thing in the world. Now you can think I'm exaggerating, but I'll tell you that in all of my presentations through this topic, and I am going to go in, I am already in spiritually, I am in intellectually, I'm in the discussion, I'm doing the astrology and I'm putting this together, and I'm only going to skim the surface of these things at first until I'm prepared to go deeper or there is a discussion. I am understating the problem, vastly understating the problem. And what this has led us to is a point of essentially where men and women are, you would think, and largely experienced, I'll tell you, from being an astrologer for 30 years and working with a lot of people through their relationships, there's a war between men and women. A civil war is being waged. And that civil war was initiated by a declaration of war in 1848 on that morning in, I've got the chart, and hold on, maybe I've got a copy of it here. It's in my new file, The Creepiest Charts of All Time. I've got Fia Mango's chart. I'm going to ask her if I can read her chart on the air. I've got Andrea Dworkin. I've got Christabel Pankhurst. Whew. My God. I did Elizabeth Cady Stanton. There are founders of this movement. The founders had ideas. The founders expressed their ideas. We need to know what they are talking about. But that's not really what I'm here to say. What I'm here to say is, and that's it, when you hear me critique feminism, I'm not at all critiquing my deeply held belief that men and women have, within the biological frame of man and woman, which I think is a real thing, is obviously a real thing. Women give birth and men don't. A boy fucked a girl, she get pregnant and have a baby. That does not work the other way around. Okay. That we are equally deserving of our potential, of our capabilities, of love, of dignity, of respect, and more than anything, of a state of peace between the sexes. And if feminism were offering that, I would be a feminist. But it's not. So I don't know exactly what I am, except just a human being who is searching for some gender between the oppressed and the oppressor. So let's take a little break, if maybe not really a break, and play a couple of pieces from a different library, a different audio library than Vision Quest. This is from the Psycherotica library, part of Book of Blue. And I won't name these pieces, but I will play them. And then I'll be back with my discussion of Shri Yantra for today.
Fuck me. Ever get to fuck me. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
You'll never get the chance to fuck me. You will never. My little pink pussy taste. My little pink pussy taste. How does it feel? How does it feel now? To know that you'll never touch me, that you'll never touch
You
me.
will never eat my pussy.
That you'll never fuck me, that you'll never get to run, that you'll never get to run up and down my body,
Don't let women know this is what you do. Don't let women know this is what you do. Wouldn't have sex ever again. Wouldn't have sex ever again.
You will never fuck me. You will never taste me. You will never taste me.
The answer is still
You
may not touch me. You may not touch me. You may not penetrate me in any way. You may not bury your face in me.
You are your lover. Your existence is the one thing that you have, and you must be ready to give it up at any moment. Surrender to life. Surrender to yourself. Surrender to death. Surrender to death. Surrender to love. Surrender to love. I am my lover. I am my lover. I make love to myself. I make love to myself. Look at me in that mirror. Look at me. I explore my vanity. I explore my vanity. You want to see me fuck myself. You want to see me fuck myself. Yes to myself. You want to see me say yes to myself. I love to fuck. I fuck. I love to fuck. Make love to yourself. Anyone I want. I am the woman who says yes. Make love to yourself. You must say yes to yourself. I am the woman who says yes. You are the only one who can say yes to yourself. You are the only one that can say yes to yourself. I need love. You need to love yourself. I know what you do. I need love. I know what you give to yourself. You need to love yourself. I know what you get from yourself. I know what you do. I know what you need. I know what you give to yourself. You want them. I know what you get from yourself. I know what you need. Are your mirror. Everyone you want is them your mirror. As your mirror. Everyone is the great eastern sun. Both are your mirror. Everyone is your mirror. Everyone is the great eastern sun.
Both are your mirror. Everyone is your mirror. Everyone is the great eastern sun. From Studio Psycherotica on Planet Waves FM. So if you haven't noticed, this whole concept of woman is highly controversial. It seems to be. Controversies around the concept of woman are a dime a dozen. They're happening constantly all day long. And if you trace this, you can start, if you go back and you sort of swim upstream toward the headwaters, you can start to see what's going on. But also if you just look at what the world is about today, and particularly, well, it's not just Western culture. It's not just the rich white world. There's things going on all throughout the world. And some of them are very disturbing. But let's just contemplate in our times, our moment, our society. Women are given a set of messages. Girls are given a set of messages. And one of them is that you are oppressed and that you are compromised, and that all men want is to own you, to control you, to fuck you, and to rape you. That's it. There are those sending out that message all the time. This is kind of the reductionist view of contemporary feminism, that all men have as their agenda and share in their agenda those things only. That's it. There's no exceptions to that. Obviously, there are exceptions. But this messaging campaign is so persistent and so pervasive and so much a part of the background that few bother to question it. And women are told, and also men are told, and men are told that they too want to just fucking control and rape and possess and own, completely compromise all women. All boys are told this to some extent, particularly in our woke times. And everyone is told that this has been going on uninterrupted for 5,000 years. I'll tell you exactly what that's a reference to. And it's not just 5,000 years as a rounding down. The Hebrew year is, we're current 5784. So it's actually 5,784 years since the time of Moses that this has been going on, i.e. we've lived under 5,784 years of nonstop, uninterrupted, nothing but patriarchy. And people accept this. Intelligent people accept it. Erudite, scholarly people just accept this. Has this been fact-checked? It is just assumed to be true. What is the basis of this? What was going on in the year 300 BC? What was going on in exactly what was going on in the year 1000 of the Common Era? What was going on in 1246 of the Common Era? What exactly is this history? But my point is that it is repeated over and over and over again. And you will hear it. You can just listen outside. You'll hear somebody saying 5,000 years of patriarchy. Well, they really mean 5,784 years of patriarchy. And as I've said before, I live in the Northeast. I live a 2-hour drive north of Manhattan. I live in a very small city, 23,000 people, but it's got a lot of yuppie influence from down in the city. Everywhere I go, here and everywhere else, women are in charge. Whether they are the owner, legal head of the organization, or whether they just run the organization, everywhere I go, women are in charge. I think we're about to have a woman as president of the United States. And yet we're told over and over and over and over again that women have absolutely been completely and entirely shut out of the running of society. Women practice law, women vote. I'm represented by a woman in the state assembly. I'm represented by a woman in the state senate. I'm represented by a woman as my governor. And yet the lie is told over and over and over and over again, to no end, ad nauseum, that women are completely shut out of the running of society. A woman is the governor of the state of New York, of all places. That does not indicate women being shut out of the running of society. But that's what we're told. So women are sent this mixed message. The girls and women are told, you are absolutely weak and compromised and you have no power. Then they look around and there's women in charge everywhere. And then at the same time, they're told you are a mighty goddess. You are something very special. There is something unique. You are one of the chosen people for being female. So the bottom line here is, first of all the deception about the total lockout, shutout, and the majority of college university students are women, significantly. Not long ago, that was not true whatsoever. You could say, well, it's just been true, but it's if it just recently become true, we should change the messaging. But no. So what we get in the end is, or we get every day is, that women are told, girls and women are told, that they're either completely downtrodden, powerless, ineffectual, existing only to be used and controlled, manipulated as tools, or that you are mighty and special but never simply human, never just a person. This is worth putting a pin in the map on this issue. It would probably be considered as, the mere fact that I'm even saying this would be considered anti-feminist because it's contradicting the feminist dogma, which runs in both directions. It runs in the direction of women are completely oppressed and tools and slaves and owned by men, and all men want to do is rape, control, and possess and fuck women. That's it. No other purpose. Nothing else turns them on. Nothing else. Not interested in anything else. And by the way, Thea Mango pointed something out that made me laugh out loud. LOL. She said, where in the body of literature is the evidence of this? Pretty much the written record of the feelings of men toward women is a vast library of an ocean of romantic poetry. Men professing their lifelong, enduring love of women, and very little ever said or written by men about how much they despise women, how much they think that women are these stupid, disgusting, blah, blah, blah. You don't see that. Well, you can say, well, that's part of the cover-up. This whole huge library from the all through classical antiquity and increasing in the Romantic era, a vast ocean of men professing their undying love for women, grieving their losses. And in the world that I live in, all the men that I know, pretty much all of them, either have a woman and will do what they can for her, or wish they could take care of a woman. They wish they could give themselves to a woman. I never hear a guy say, I want to get that bitch and make her do everything for me. I never hear that ever. You can think, well, where am I that's so different? But this is going back my whole life. But I'm told over and over again that all I want to do, and I really object to this, that all I want to do is control, rape, possess, and own and abuse the women in my life. Over and over again. And it is tough to hear this. To tune into any station, pretty much anywhere on WOKE radio, which is 50,000 stations and subsidiaries and affiliates of our political culture. This is what I and all other men are told. And I think that is really weird. And I think it's really weird that all these girls and women are told the same thing. Now, I get there are more traditional facets of society that include all manner of, fundamentalist religions and so forth. But even in Orthodox Judaism, the women are very powerful. In Catholic families, the women are very powerful. In Christian conservatism, well, technically, in theory, the man is the head of the family, but the women are very powerful. So I don't care who is said to be the head of the family, who is the spiritual fountainhead of the family. In practice, the women are powerful. The fire department, that's another story. The police department, that's another story. But I see the women on the police department treated with respect where I live. They're treated like fully qualified members that they are. And the fire department, same thing. Okay. So I am concerned that this controversy is ersatz, that it is a made-up controversy, that it is clash for the sake of someone instigating a clash just to have it. It's essentially divide and conquer. How would men and women get along if we were just left to our own devices and we didn't have someone telling us every day that all men are potentially rapists, or by default, by extension, all men, or any penis is a potential weapon of a felony? And it was Germaine Greer in the 1960s and 1970s who said to women, you don't realize how much they dislike you. And this was taken seriously. But everywhere you look, and I get that there are exceptions in relationships and times of divorce. I saw a 1963 black Corvette parked outside my door on my street today at the Muscle Car Show. And the guy's partner had keyed a 1963 black Corvette in otherwise mint condition. Scraped the thing up. Is that appropriate? What would he have had to do to deserve getting his classic 60-year-old vehicle keyed? If it was that bad, she should call the police, reported him for something. But apparently that was not an option. So instead, she just marred the finish on what was obviously this man's most prized material possession. Didn't stop him from bringing it to the car show, by the way. So I am curious about this controversy. I have become curious about this controversy. I have noticed the way that men and boys are spoken of and treated. I take note of the fact that there's something like 50 domestic violence centers for men in the United States and 2,000 for women. There's a lot more. That proportion is it's like 40-1. The proportion is a lot different than that. It is much closer to parity. I hear a lot of domestic violence calls. You cannot say, because I listen to the scanner, everyone knows that this is a domestic violence problem, not a problem of man-on-woman violence. And Larry Allen, an astute Planet Waves listener who introduced me to Janice, told me that statistically, this is like FBI data, that there's the most violence in women-women relationships, there's the second most violence in male-female relationships, and there's the least violence in male-male relationships. Well, if men are so inherently violent, where's the violence in the male-male relationships? You'd think you'd have the most violence among the most violent people. You would certainly have the most dogfights among the most disagreeable dogs. But no. So I am reading and listening in earnest to Janice's deconstruction of the history of feminism, and this has got my attention. I'm particularly interested in what happened in Seneca Falls in 1848. This weird thing called the Declaration of Sentiments, a kind of satire on unintentional parody, mocking the Declaration of Independence, telling all kinds of lies. The person who wrote it, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, said that no woman is allowed to have an education, but she, in fact, had been to a very prestigious seminary. So that's not true. She's advertising that no woman can get an education. But she had one. And as I'm reading this history, I'm wondering what the underlying power source of the controversy is. These things make me curious. I don't just take things for granted. It can take me a while to notice the problem, and sometimes it's really got to whack me on the head. I mean, it whacked me on the head in 2018 when I was cast as a sexual predator, fired from all my jobs, thinking, what is this? I'm taking this personally, but now I realize this is just a trope. It is completely cliched, where you can say that anything, especially during the whole thing in 2018, it seemed like anything a man did was oppressive of women, and one of the things I was accused of was being friendly to dogs. Now, I thought that was hilarious, but it was also revealing of the thinness of any of the claims involved, and also of the lack of consciousness involved of those who were making all of the various different ridiculous accusations, which mostly involved the claim that I liked women. This was, if you happen to pry into this, the claim was that I liked women, was attracted to women. P.S. Everyone who takes any interest in my life knows I am not heterosexual. I like women. I gravitate toward them sexually, emotionally, affectually, but I am some form of pansexual, bisexual, and one of my regrets of having grown up under the influence of the AIDS propaganda story was I was heavily influenced and biased against having sex with men owing to that whole scenario. Didn't stop me. So when I saw, felt, and witnessed and experienced this propaganda campaign, based, by the way, on the fact that I wrote an article questioning what was being said about both men and women, and all the people I quoted, like 15 people quoted in this article, including top writer, top Merkin, I forget her first name, and the woman who wrote Handmaid's Tale, and then maybe 10 or 12 of my own clients and readers. Well, there was nothing misogynist in this. I think misogyny is when you say all women are assholes and corrupt. That's like an example of misogyny. What I have learned studying this history is that to merely question the feminist dogma that all men are perverts is considered misogynist. Just to give you an example, this is written by, this quotation comes from, this is one of the things I found along the Fiamango Trail. This woman was knighted, by the way. She was knighted. She became Lady Dame. That is a second highest level of knight. And her name is, I don't have it written on her quote, I have it written on her chart. Her name is not Andrea Dworkin, Christabel Pankhurst, born on the equinox of September in 1880. She's a little bit past, she's sort of like the second generation of women who were at Seneca Falls. And Pankhurst wrote, in attempting to, well, you'll see what she's saying. She said, quote, "Lewdness and obscenity is what these men," meaning all men, "what these men crave, and what they get in houses of ill fame, brothels. Marriage does not satisfy them. They fly to women who will not resent foul words and acts, and will even permit unnatural abuse of the sex function." Quote. This quote is not only typical, it is extremely polite. In other words, in the 19th century, when the women's rights movement begins, the claim is made that 80% of men have contracted gonorrhea from brothels and are infecting their wives. 80%. Where's that number come from? It sounds like it came from Fauci. Just made up. 80%. So the idea that men are inherently perverts, and rapists goes back to the first days. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, is that her correct name? I call her Cady, C-A-D-Y. In an early case in her lifetime, in an early instance of why women should be given the vote, right? Because feminism is sold as women's suffrage, but it was actually men are perverts. She said, there was a case where a woman had killed her child. And she said the reason the woman killed her child was because she had been raped. The rape was not, there was no conviction. There was no connection made. There's no actual verification of any of this. But that's what the propaganda campaign said. And she argued the woman should be acquitted acquitted for murder of her child, homicide, first-degree murder, planned intentional murder, because men are perverts. And this was repeated so many times over such a long phase of history that by the early 20th century, the suffrage movement and the temperance movement had fully fused and come out as one thing, and the reason that alcohol had to be banned and prohibition begun in the United States and women given the vote was that men were perverts and that alcohol made it horribly worse, and that we needed to completely fix society. They promised we would fix all the problems of all of society by giving women the vote. As far as I can tell, society is either as bad or worse today than it was then. So what's going on here? What is underneath all of this? And by the way, these women in 1848 were arguing against motherhood. This is not just women's lib generation in the 1970s. They were arguing against any domestic responsibilities for women, no matter what men did, no matter how many wars they fought and how many hours a day they worked, arguing against motherhood to the point of advocating for women murdering their babies and being acquitted for it. I don't know what, I can't imagine what anyone hearing this is thinking. And if I'm making this up, I'm definitely nuts, but I'm not making this up. And I've heard bits and bobs of this, but like most people, I thought that the women's movement began in the early 20th century. I didn't take the class that said, oh, by the way, Seneca Falls, 1848, repeating over and over again, all men are perverts. 80% of men have given their wives gonorrhea because they fuck in brothels. Now, first of all, this broad, what is her damn name? The lady, put the chart up on top. The lady Christabel, writing this statement, I'm going to move on, but I want to just say something else here. She writes, again, the lewdness and obscenity is what these men, meaning all men, these men crave, and what they get in houses of ill fame. She's making it sound like all men go to prostitutes, and this is because marriage does not satisfy them with satisfying quotes. They fly to women who will not resist foul words and acts and will even permit unnatural abuse of the sex function. What the fuck does that mean? She's talking about what happens in brothels. First of all, it is clear that this woman has probably never met a prostitute in her life, much less set foot in a brothel in her life. If she had, she would know that sex in a brothel is the most boring thing. It is in and out. It is the original wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Collect the money. Next customer. Get them out. There is nothing experimental, creative, whatever. Now, if men have a lot of money, very few select rich men might do something kinky. This, to me, was documented in Steinbeck, where in the book East of Eden, where Kate, the kind of anti-hero villain of the book who shoots her husband and is never charged. She's never charged with who has done nothing to her, and opens a brothel in town for the purpose of compromising the leaders of the town, lured them into kind of SME kind of things, which today is considered perfectly normal, and photograph them and then blackmail them so that she could continue to run her business without being interrupted. It was all for her own profit gain and protection. She became extremely wealthy. This is, to my mind, it cannot be a made-up story. This has got to be based on something. East of Eden is quite autobiographical for Steinbeck and his family. It's the only novel where Steinbeck's actually appear in the story. And I can tell she has never been anywhere near any of this, because if you have, it's like, All right. Now, I happen to have been studying all of this like my entire life. Been interested in all of this, the real realm of human sexual experience. Well, that's a no-no. To have knowledge is a no-no. And part of this is driven by what seems to be my prime directive on the physical plane, which is to fully integrate my inner feminine and my inner masculine into one being, where I do not need to project either one outside of me, but rather I contain them, and I am kind of a self-contained unit of my own erotic nature, my own sexual nature. And this has been inspiring of all kinds of art experiments and other experiments and relationships, and my relationships have been on different terms than the normal male-female romantic relationships, with no expectation of marriage. Never. It was possible in one relationship in university. We never once talked about it, and it did not happen, and I knew that I was not made for that life. Plus, we were both bisexual and so forth. So this is, got another existence. My question, as I have encountered this history and this history of meanness, and hearing the things that men and boys are told about themselves over and over and over again, to the point where I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to find out what this is about. So, which of these is sent first? 9th at 3:33, 9th at 1:54. I'm going to read these two in order. These are emails to Janice. And what I'm questioning is, what is underneath this? What is the power source of this animosity? You follow what I'm saying here? No effect exists in the world without some formal cause, something emerging from a condition of the deep environment, causing it, making it possible. A lot of the answers to these mysteries would be revealed in taboo matters of sex. I know this is not your topic, and few people want to discuss it, so that the discussion does not happen. By the way, the discussion is basically forbidden. Knowledge of all of these realms is forbidden. Everything I talk about in Tantra Studio and Shri Yantra Studio is forbidden knowledge. As such, anti-feminist. Forbidden knowledge about sex and the true sexual nature of men and women and how they relate to each other. And what I said was, I've seen and experienced some things that most people have not. It is very much my topic. I've spent much time in the inner sanctum of sexuality. And what I'm getting at here is there's something that is fundamentally different between men and women, and that the women who are saying that all men are rapists and perverts and go to whores and give 80% of their wives gonorrhea, this is coming from somewhere. And it is women saying this and not men. And what I say is, this is not merely about the ability to gestate and birth a human being, though that is involved. It is part of the same thing. So I'm going to elaborate a little bit. The one actual difference between men and women that is irrevocable, has nothing to do with who's capable of being an underwater demolition specialist, is that men provide sperm and women provide the egg, and the baby is gestated inside the woman. There are no exceptions to this in the entire history of the human race. that I know of, unless you really think that Bill Gates is making a deal with China to make fake babies. I have not seen any evidence of this at all. I have not heard a credible rumor of this. So, as of today, as of mid-September 2024, every single human being comes from a sperm donated by a male person and an egg by a female person and is gestated inside the body of one woman or another, usually the woman who got fucked by the man with the sperm. Well, how about that? There is a big difference. There is a major difference. And these things are not properly exactly equivalent. All right, here's where I get into the meat of the discussion. So it's not just about the woman can give birth. She gets pregnant, she can give birth. Nearly any woman, if she wants to, and is relaxed, can be fucked by dozens of men. And if she develops or innately I don't mean raped, I mean fucked because she wants to be fucked and has the opportunity. And if she develops or is innately has the emotional capacity, can be continuously orgasmic with them or with women. Many women have told me they want to experience this, especially multiple men fucking them. Women you might take for ordinary women or prudes or people you just never would think that person would have that thought in their mind. I have heard this is a kind of recurring fantasy of one woman and a group of men, and she wants them all. She's going to take them all one by one or more than one by one. And I'm not saying that you, if you're a woman, have had this fantasy, but I'm saying that many women have and have had this fantasy, and many create scenes where they can do this. I've been at them. They can keep going and going. And so this is always cast by women as some form of, by feminists as some form of rape. It's always cast by the theorists, like the lady Christabel. Dame Christabel, I think, was her proper. It would be the lady or dame. Are you a Brit? Which was it? Which is it? Is it both? Dame Christabel would say, well, this is just nothing more than gang rape. But what if she's like, let's go, bring it on? Is she capable of that desire? Is that, or is she so compromised that desire has to be taken as nothing more than the product of conditioning by the patriarchy itself? Give me a break. Nearly any woman, if she wants to and is relaxed, can be fucked by dozens of men and can be continuously orgasmic. And many women told me they want to do this and they can keep going and going. There are very few men who could fuck more than 1 to 3 women in a session, short of having some extreme Taoist training and control. In other words, if a man is going to fuck 20 women, which is, let's just say, likely or not, he cannot be ejaculating into every one. It's not going to work. It's not going to work because his body can't produce semen that fast. It's not going to work because his hormones are not going to sustain this. But if he goes through years of Taoist training or has some 1 in 10,000 or something, pick a number, innate ability, maybe he could do something like this, but he's not going to be continuously orgasmic fucking all of these women. But the women can be continuously orgasmic. They can go further and further out into the stratosphere of bliss. And there's a lot in the book Sex at Dawn about this thing called sperm competition. One of the reasons why we have these narratives about women being possessed, and to the extent that women's sexuality was held to one man, is because there seems to be something innate in women to fuck as many men as possible when they're ovulating, and you don't know who the father is going to be. If she's fucked 3 guys in one night, 5, 10 in 1 week or 1 day, there's this thing called sperm competition. Sperm competition is the sperm in her vagina competing for who will fertilize the egg. And the strongest sperm wins. And that seems evolutionary, right? Doesn't that seem like it makes sense? But of course, this is not fit the values of the culture. It does not fit Catholic values, Jewish values, Muslim values, or coincidentally, feminist values. There are sexual realities, now I'm continuing to read, sexual realities of women's bodies and their desires that are highly taboo to discuss, and the material and experiences verge into the metaphysical. One of them is a nearly cosmic capacity for multiple orgasm that I have personally witnessed and experienced many times, that is a holy grail for many women, but is really not so difficult to experience, especially if their partner has a clue. In this state, an emotional space opens up that is very unusual. And this is only created by women or through the vehicle of the female body. There often need to be men present for this to happen, and other women. This is not something I know about from books. I have swam in many of these waters and possess unusual capacities for a man, psychic and emotional, which is how I know about this stuff. I sense that nearly no men have any concept whatsoever of their potential or of this potential in women, and could not imagine experiencing this. And I say that I am actually basic in my training. I've not had Taoist training. I would be considered a tantric neophyte. I might be considered an aspirant, not necessarily an initiate. I don't know. I've not been to any of these temples, and I think a lot of it is a lot of fluff. Religion and nearly all right. So let me finish that thought. That I seriously doubt that most men have a concept of their own potential, but I've only heard of this mythical female multiple orgasm through rumors and fake orgasms in pornography, and have most men, as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, and we'll see. The emails aren't going to tell me anything, the number of emails. I'm not going to probably get none. Don't really understand the unbelievable sexual capacity that women have to basically do nearly anything they want, except they don't have a penis to fuck, and they can't impregnate a woman. Besides that leaves a lot of room for possibilities. Religion and nearly all spiritual views, and I would add all political views, prohibit these experiences and these discussions, but do nothing about the underlying capacity, which is a biological capacity. This is what I'm getting at here, is that you can suppress this, you can hide this, you can bury it, you can deny it, you can flog it, you can you can punish it, you can philosophize it, you can moralize it, you can make it illegal, but you cannot change it. Except, I'm going to get to the exception. And even then, religion and nearly all spiritual views prohibit these experiences and these discussions, but do nothing about the underlying capacity unless you talk about Muslims snipping off the clitoris and labia to prevent exactly this. And I reference an article in the New York Times, which I now have to find. Hold on a second. I've got it printed from here in the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. Front page article last Sunday's New York Times. I've got a picture of it. It was essentially the entire cover of the print edition of the New York Times. African woman, 95 years old, the 96-year-old who defied a ban on female genital cutting. Yasin Fati is her name, a traditional practitioner of female genital cutting in the West African nation of Gambia, became the first to be convicted there, but her case led to a backlash and a popular campaign to make it legal again. And they show a picture of her hands with essentially a tube of antibiotic, a little bit of cotton, and a razor blade. And that is how this is done. These girls, I don't know how old they are, but basically she I'm sure has done this countless thousands of times, as did her mother and her grandmother, going back for generations. This is it is a family dynasty thing, sliced off the inner labia, and the clitoris of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of women. My blood is about to boil right now. Mrs. Fatty, but okay. In Gambia, female genital cutting usually means removing the clitoris and part of the labia minora and sometimes sealing the vagina shut except for a tiny hole. To outsiders, this seems unspeakably cruel. That's an understatement. Who wrote this? Ruth McLean. But Gambian villagers see the girls who are not cut as unclean, not mangled, cut, Jesus Christ, and unreligious. The girls often become social outcasts because they've got their whole pussy intact. No man will marry them. Nobody will eat their cooking. Mrs. Fatty believed that the consequences of not being cut went much further. She asserted that against all medical evidence, that by cutting girls, she was protecting their health. Uncut women are likely to suffer and die in childbirth. Jesus fucking Christ. Like the labia minora and the clitoris do not play a role in childbirth. You bet they do. This is a lie. She's lying. She's using a medical excuse. And she said they're more likely to get sexually transmitted infections. You should watch some of the Bailey's videos on STIs if you think they exist. And then there was the sexual desire of women who still had clitorises, which many people in Bakaji, Bakadaji, Bakadaji, thought was a huge problem. Having a clitoris, a huge problem. Quote, here's the quote I'm getting to. Quote, says Mrs. Fatty, if a woman is not cut, she's always ready for sex. She can do it from morning to night. Morning to night, she says, with a little smile. Okay. So this is the underlying, in technical philosophy terms, formal cause. This morning till night can fuck 20 men, or however many. The craving for sperm competition. Is likely to have sex with a man other than her partner when ovulating. Why? Sperm competition. Body is saying, mix it up in there. This is not what we're taught in school. We're always taught it's one man, one woman. Okay. And the conservatives of any stripe don't want to talk about this. But that does not prevent the body from howling. Perhaps quietly, perhaps suppressed, and perhaps immediately converted into guilt. This is the kind of, if they're not chopping off their labias, they're guilting them off. And leading to incredible conflict and the inability to acknowledge the most, just clipped, the most basic sexual desire. The most basic sexual desire. Forget about 20 men. Forget just what do you want? Who do you want? Forget about the consequences long enough to just have an honest conversation. Well, so then we are smothered under a blizzard of mendacity, and this suppresses all love. If you can't tell your partner the truth about who you are and what you want, what do you have then? What do you have? How is that intimacy? It's not. You wonder where the intimacy goes. By the way, if you you don't necessarily need to get 20 guys, but masturbate with your partner, and a lot of these seeming problems will go away. It is a very honest thing to do. Have a mirror in the space. You may suddenly find that no matter how dull, suppressed, or non-existent your sex life was prior to that day, suddenly you feel like you're 16 again. Masturbate together. Flip a coin for who goes first. Not touching. Don't get each other off. That's not it. Stay some distance apart. There's a PS to this letter. Let me see if I can find it. Here in the Chamber of the Secret Dalliance. No, that's a James Joyce manuscript. That is a John Rappaport article. Here it is. There's a PS. Male and female are not polar opposites. This is very important to understand. They're not polar opposites. And a lot of the head trip, a lot of the wild exaggeration, goddesses, all-powerful goddesses of all beauty, but 5,780 whatever years of patriarchy, nothing but compromised, possessed, raped, but all-powerful goddesses capable of anything. This disparity, this polar this polar syndrome is about male and female are not polar opposites. This is a source of big controversy and misunderstanding that is rarely named. It's much of what feminists are hurting from and upset about, but are too dim to understand and too shameful to contemplate. The way that all of this is concealed is by shaming. This is why whenever you see shame, you've got to stop for a second and say, I don't care who is being shamed. The worst person in the world, the best person in the world, 2 dogs for fucking, 2 skunks for fucking, your daughter for masturbating, your son for masturbating. Shame conceals the truth of this. And by the way, many times I've said that the in terms of tantric practice, like introductory basic tantric practice, this is why going toward what is embarrassing or shameful contains the very, very best stuff. It is the shame and embarrassment that hold the world as we know it, the structures of the world, call it whatever you want, society, the Great Pyramid, the patriarchy, the Rothschilds, the oppressed, the class structure, capitalism, whatever you want. This is all held together by shame and embarrassment. And so if you want the personal release from this, this is why you go toward the shame. That behind that shame is the great attractor of your self-actualization, and it is likely to feel really good. If you use substances to get there, or if not, you have to be ready to handle some guilt backlash. And that processing that becomes part of the process. It does not mean you did the wrong thing. It does not mean you did the wrong thing. It means that your psyche is having an inflammation reaction from having honored something that is deeply true about yourself. So male and female are not polar opposites, but neither principle, male or female, can exist without the other. All that female power of which they speak, and which we're told all the time, except when we're told that women are just want to be possessed and raped, all that female power is neutralized or fizzles out without the presence of the masculine in some form, usually the form of a man or sperm or testosterone. In the end, the female principle short circuits everything by declaring herself ruler of the universe instead of positive, constructive, exemplar. Positive, constructive, exemplar. I think that was it. Oh my God. Is anyone still listening? I'm going to read some poetry and play a song, eat some food, and be back. And put this where you can hear it. Venus opposite Chiron. One last mention of the chart. while we're talking about this unusual thing that is woman, that if you like woman, this is the thing. This is the thing to respect. Remembering hardly any of them do, because it's so frightful, shameful, horrifying. Oh my God. Well, you only know someone's sexual truth, at least at first, in what they're thinking in the last 3 to 4 minutes before orgasm from masturbation. Self-given orgasm, when you're totally free, when all of your resistance drops, those things that you want in those 3 to 4 minutes, and then like in the last 30, the resistance goes down and down, the ego gets thinner and thinner and thinner, and then suddenly it's not there, and like anything is possible. What's the thing? That's a very important representation of your sexual truth. Venus opposite Chiron and Eris. Catastrophobia, says Barbara Hanklow, Venus opposite Chiron, but it's Chiron and Eris. We've got the natural, sensuous, artfully created Venusian woman kind of in the crosshairs of Chiron Eris. This would take a lot of words to explain, or like the right 5 words. But there is tremendous fear. And at the end of the day, all of the controversy, the guilting, the shaming, the politics, blah, 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 is concealing the possibility of self-actualization, becoming wholly, completely, beautifully, irrevocably human. And in the wisdom of Tantra, it is the women who lead the way through their own self-becoming. If the women are not deeply, fully invested in their actual self-becoming, which includes the complete sexual self-realization of who they are, nobody leads the way. There's no way to lead. All right. Music. I don't know what this piece is called, but you know who did it. Here you go. Green Sea Dream. It is early morning, just past dawn, and I'm standing by the sea in Brooklyn. Everything is green. The sea is green. The seabed is green. The beach is green. Large rocks at the back of the sand are green. It's like green moss is covering everything. The green waves are crashing a little further out from the shore than usual, as if the tide is low. I'm standing on the beach in the middle of all this green, feeling sex flow throughout my entire being. I am very eager to take off my clothes and masturbate. I'm reluctant to, feeling I might be seen. There are some people occasionally walking past along a doorway next to a Catholic school building about 30 feet away. I can see them as they walk along the walkway, which is like a boardwalk just above the beach. I'm looking at them through the branches of a tree. I know they haven't noticed me, but I'm afraid they will the moment I am vulnerable. I am dying to get myself off. I must. I need to. I walk up the beach toward the Catholic school, looking for somewhere private. There is an overwhelming silence. I am sensing that people are watching me from the school windows, all of which have their shades drawn, despite it being so early in the morning. I am subconsciously certain that I have been seen. I ignore this feeling, certain I'm absolutely alone. I see some stairs going down to an outside entrance to the school basement. At the bottom of the stairs is a locked metal door to the basement and a small space outside of it, secluded from any view from above. I lean back against the wall, standing, and open up my pants and begin masturbating. My cock is slick, and I'm using two hands, one to hold it at the base and one to massage it up and down from the tip to the base. I am panting and moaning a little and steadily opening up to myself, approaching orgasm, lost in myself. At this moment, I look to my side a few feet away, and there's a person watching me, standing a little crouched over where a concrete wall used to be, looking at me through a white mask. I cannot tell whether it's a man or a woman. It's sort of neither, but seeming to be a little more like a man, if anything. He's wearing a thin black cape and looking at me, himself surprised and a little skittish. I know that I have two choices at this instant, to cover myself in shame or to just let go with him watching me. Suddenly, I've turned toward him and am pumping my cock harder, and then enter my orgasm, showing him, moaning and looking straight at his masked eyes. Suddenly, he runs up to me and snaps his mouth around the tip of my cock. I ejaculate into it as he swallows, kneeling in front of me. Lucid Dream, San Francisco, April 1992. Burns like blue nighttime, unwinds to where the ether turns to sky above the clouds and sands wide open in the black breeze. Somehow, you call me even here, where the stakes are deeper, and the whole dream is the dim light caught in a white streak across the skin of the eye. And the streak of time between our lives is the moment between dawn and break of day, a flash of memory. I dream a crone in you. Her eyes, soft light, 2 candles, bright enough to read by. We read one another in the slow evening. Her voice, the voice of her heart, beneath soft breasts which also regard me. Her belly, soft and round, birthing and gravity have softened her, all of her. And as I speak, I feel like I'm pouring water into a large pool, disappearing into the silence. I dream a crone in you, the daughter of grandmothers, the saint of pagans. I speak to her when you're sleeping. The steady pulse of her pumps drops of red fire into my heart, and my heart drinks them, slowly, growing softer and round. Kingston, 12/4/97. Black against the sun. I want to watch you burn holes in this world, see you flash in shadows, fire in the freezing rain. See you stare at sin until it is a lie. Scream at the voice of man, voice of death, siren, flower, vilified. Your knowledge is poison to the world of noise, to the shattered plane, the glass feet of the insane. Oh, but sing your name in a stream of all your voices. Black against the sun, I say that you are one. You are one. Kingston, 12/4/97. Our community lost a beloved and important leader last week. His name, Renato DeBella. And he held, first of all, a space in my heart just because I loved him. And second, he was one of the landlords who rented me the space that became Blue Studio in 2008. And on Tuesday was the Mass of Christian Burial. I did not attend. I had a guest in town, a musician. And we were making music at the time of the official Catholic mortuary rite called the Mass of Christian Burial. And this piece is some of what we channeled at that time. Vision Quest featuring Kristen Williams. Sands of Urantia. Tackling the Heelstones, Noontime, retracing existence in 1,000 random patterns. Looking for reminders of the air that I breathe, of the place that I am, of the time that it is. Faces like boring questions, not really begging, and time converging, the gaps and the lapses, the spaces in the dream. It is the torture of knowledge in not knowing, circling in not seeing the circles, searching, cross-eyed and cross-minded, and poring at the veil, unaware that it's a veil. Travesty for the effortless, for the lone body rummaging darknesses, escapes imagined dangers, unravels these vanishing strands of light and sound as the heels pound these sands, now stone. Okay, here it is again. Excuse me. Lunar eclipse coming. Hunting the moon. I step into the snap chill of the April night, and before the motion detectors see me and flood the world with incandescent glare, I see the moon in the clouds, in the trees, in the east. Nothing could have prepared me for such a sudden breath. Not spending the better part of 3 days studying the energetics of planets, not the secret desire to be here, not anything. I look at her. She looks at me, low and still and large. My mind interjects with a question. What sign is it in? I don't know. I do know there was an eclipse this morning. I know that Saturn conjoining the moon can thwart the emotions, that Saturn square the moon, unless redeemed, can signify a lifetime of what some call affliction by karma. She disappears into the clouds, and I'm safe. One step, and I'm seen by the floodlights, which burst in and erase the entire sky. Minutes pass as I drive, and I stop at your house. Smeagol is playing Beware of Dog. I say hello, but he ignores me. Now I step away from the porch, closer to the nighttime, and she's back, lighting up the world. Alice Bailey says she's dead. Some say she's a lens of consciousness. I say she is silent and listening to the silence. The buzz of a streetlight, some dogs barking, an occasional engine passing on Main Street only make the silence louder. She is listening to me stand here with nothing to say, struck dumb, moonstruck, my boots solid in my 2 footprints. The earth will turn, and she will seem to traverse the night. And in the dark of morning, she will set against the shadow of the Catskills, and I will watch from the ridge as we disappear. Autobiographical note. What can I say about all the minutes of those days, the miles of those journeys, the states of mind and the games of solitaire? Fast abandoning tabs on the lost and the retrieved as time thunders laughing across the thresholds of the years. I had tumbled back into some new gape of the ancient dream, deceived in believing I was deceived, desiring for the prison of want, searching for some gender between the oppressed and the oppressor. Then streamed with a great perk of bile from the labyrinth that was never there. You have come close to truth, and only this stands between you and the bridge that leads you to it. I opened my eyes, my rib was returned. Hope is a hard love to part for the hopeful. Then met with the vision of this precipitous beginning. A child in my arms, tame and wild cats all around me. Now, said the voice, step out lightly. But I could not see the crossing. Vision can deceive, and so I learn to listen, basking as I am in the light of the invisible sun.